Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 13th edition of the BelDOCS International Documentary Film Festival. My name is Igor Stanojevic. I'm the curator of the festival, and today we are talking about the film The Ghost of Peter Sellers. And with us today is the director of the film, Peter Medak. Hello, Peter.
Hi guys. How are you all? Nice to talk to you.
How are you doing? How are you doing in LA?
Well, it's pretty disastrous, with the pandemic and all the figures are constantly going up and up and up, and it's complete science fiction. Everything, it doesn't make any sense, and it feels like the Third World War,
Yeah, it's certainly an unusual time everywhere, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same story everywhere. Sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better, but I mean, it's totally unpredictable, everything.
So we are here today talking about a different disaster from 43 years ago. You set out to make a film called Ghost in the Noonday Sun, and then many things went wrong. So if you could take us to begin with to a time before you started working on this film.
But it was my fourth movie, and I had a very fortunate start, having directed my first film in 1968 with the wonderful Glenda Jackson. It was her first film and my first film in London, where I used to live, and I live in Los Angeles. And so then after that, I did another film for Columbia called Day in the Death of Joe Egg with Ella Meeks and Janet Sussman. And then I did the Ruling Class with Peter O'Toole. And so these first three movies happened 1 year after the other, which was incredibly fortunate and lucky. And then I did Ghost in the Noonday Sun with Peter Sellers, Spike Milligan, Peter Boyle, and Tony Franciosa, and a bunch of wonderful English actors, Murray Melvin. Anyhow, so and that's how it happened, And originally I was going to direct a film called Death Wish after my Ruling Class, Peter O'Toole's movie. But I walked out of that film because of kind of artistic differences and from United Artists. And that's when I walked into the arms of Peter Sellers when he asked me to come and direct his film, the 17th Century Pirate Comedy. And I said yes to it. And having just walked out of one movie, and I then started working on the pirate comedy. And it sounded like an incredibly funny, crazy, kind of zany, nonsensical British comedy, very much in the genre of the Goon shows, which really started Peter Sellers, Spike Milligan, and Harry Seacombe, and a bunch of other wonderful English comedians. And it was a certain type of English humor. I keep saying it's a nonsensical comedy, where the storyline didn't have to make sense because it didn't make any sense. And it was very much like what the Monty Python did later on. And all the Monty Python shows and films and the television series was inspired really by Spike Milligan humor. And so it was that kind of comedy. And then very early on, I mean, the entire movie basically was to be shot at sea in the Mediterranean from Kyrenia, from Cyprus, which is a harbor in Cyprus. And that's where we were based, and that's where the whole thing had started. And all this years ago in 1973. And it's a long, long time ago. And unfortunately, the movie turned out to be a total disaster, having managed to make three very successful movies for me to start with, and this should have been the absolute crowning of it all, but it wasn't, because there were all kinds of terrible production problems, and the boat sank, and all kinds of terrible things have happened on the way, which normally happen when you start filming out in the water, which is a total impossibility. But that really was the beginning of the film.
So
and
you mentioned
we went on.
you mentioned that the boat sank the very first day, even before the shooting started, actually. And
Exactly.
something that I found interesting in watching the Ghost of the Noonday Sun is that you have a boat crash in the film itself.
Yes, of course. But unfortunately, the Greek captain was very happy and very drunk when he pulled into the harbor of Marinia and really missed the inlet of the water. And he hit the rocks on the right-hand side of the walkway of the harbor. And there was this terrible crashing noise. And it basically damaged the boat so badly that we couldn't start filming with it for about a month. It had to be repaired. And then, so the whole production started under very difficult duress in a way. And it was beautiful sunshine and gorgeous Mediterranean, and everything was perfect except when Peter arrived to the island, which was at the very beginning because he was there standing next to me when the boat crashed. When he arrived to the island, he unfortunately was in a very depressed state because he just broke up with his then girlfriend, Liza Minnelli. And the last thing he wanted to do is to start filming. So he started to find any excuse to cause all kinds of problems, to delay everything. And eventually he realized, we have to start filming, which we did. And then those problems began to escalate day by day. And the whole shoot turned into kind of a nightmare. But I still went on filming for, I can't remember anymore, for 67 or 78 days of the schedule. And, I was determined to finish the film because it had to be finished. And Peter had tried to manipulate anything and everything to stop the movie shooting and have the film closed down, and he to be allowed to go back to London and get paid off, but of course that didn't happen because that's not how things happen, or happened then, or happens even today. Because once you start a contract and you commit yourself to make a film, you have to make the film, whatever happens. And so it was a very intense production, but at the same time, we carried on shooting, day by day and step by step and move forward to try to complete the film.
So at the time, the studio deemed the film unreleasable, but years later, actually relatively recently, the film ended up being released and released in quite a nice picture and audio quality Blu-ray sort of edition. So, watching the film today, I mean, there's actually like quite a few, the film looks very nice. It's very sort of sometimes beautifully filmed. Certainly one can sense your visual style, even though obviously the whole thing doesn't really come together quite ideally. So I was just wondering if you've seen the film recently, and what is your estimation of it now? Are there any parts of it that you're happy and satisfied with, looking back?
Well, the thing is that the film wasn't released, not because I finished the film and mixed it and everything, made the perfect color copies of it and all that. And it was going to be released, but then Colombia refused to accept it because Peter Sellers missed about 14 days of the film when he actually wasn't physically there. He didn't turn up because he declared himself that he wasn't feeling well, that he was ill. Then he faked a heart attack and collapsed and sent him to the hospital. And then we stopped shooting for days. And as you see it from the documentary, he turned up in London at the same time while he was supposed to be in the hospital in Carigna, having dinner with Princess Margaret in a most popular restaurant in Belgravia in London, and got off from the island and basically faked his heart attack because he wanted to have dinner with Princess Margaret, you know. And so, you know, those kind of things happen. And then because of that, you know, the production suffers, you know, because you can't make up for 14 days while your star is missing, who's basically in every shot of the film. So we had to cut around and keep cutting certain scenes. And then that's why Colombia refused to accept the film, saying the film is incomplete. I mean, the film was complete because somehow we pulled it together and made up for the missing parts, but didn't shoot it because Peter wasn't available. So they used it as an excuse not to accept it, and because of that, it wasn't released originally in 1973. And then later on, John Heyman, who was also the exec producer of the film, who's David Heyman's father, who produced all the Harry Potter movies. So John Heyman, then his company, released it as a kind of a DVD, not version, it was the same cut of what the film was, but a DVD version of the film. And that's the one which I guess you can see or get somehow on internet or somewhere, you know, and it's called A Ghost in the Noonday Sun. So that's really how it came about.
I was wondering how you feel about the film itself now. Are you happy? Are you generally satisfied with how it came out?
No, I'm not really satisfied because I'm missing all those other scenes which we weren't able to shoot to make up more of a kind of comedy action sequences with other boats and stuff like that. But I think it is much better, the film, than we all thought it was at the time when we finished working on it, you know. And what would be incredible to have the original film, Ghost in the Noonday Sun, and the film documentary, Ghost of Peter Sellers, to be released together on one DVD, you know. And I'm hoping that maybe the Criterion Collection, maybe, because the film is available. I mean, unfortunately, John Heyman, my exec producer, had passed away soon after I shot the interview with him, and we were both talking to each other about what happened all those years ago on the film. And he owns the original film, and it exists, and it's sitting at Pinewood Studios in London or in England, and his wonderful son, who's probably one of the best Hollywood producers today, David Heyman, controls the film. So there is maybe every hope that eventually the two films could be put out together, which really would be great fun. And I'm not sure which would be better to watch first. Probably to watch the documentary first and then see the film, and then you see what had happened. But it was a wonderful opportunity, which actually I did not want to do. When my producer of the documentary film, Paul Aikavu from Cyprus, came to me about 4 years ago, making this proposition that we should make a film about my own movie. And I said to him, I said, you know, it's the last thing I really want to do, because I had such a difficult time, and it was probably my worst experience of about 20, 25 movies I have made. And I said, it's the last thing I want to do is go back into that whole period and relive everything. And Paul kept calling and kept pushing me and all that. And then eventually I thought about it again after about pondering about it for 2 weeks. And I said, you know what, why don't we just do it, you know? And then we talked a lot on the phone at 6 in the morning, like we are talking now. And I'm sitting in the same chair in my living room talking about it, you know. And then eventually I said, yes, I'll do it. And then one day I got on the plane, came back to London, and went to King's Road and started filming the documentary. And I shot it actually without putting down one word into a piece of paper or writing anything about it, you know. It's just that fortunately I knew so much about it, having lived through it, because once you make a film as a director, which you all know, you know, you never forget a frame of it ever, and it stays with you forever. So it was quite easy for me to really make this 91-minute film to tell the story of what happened on the movie and what happened behind the scenes of the film, why I actually did it. And I actually made the film because of the period of the movie, which was the 70s of London, because of Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan and Peter Boyle and all these wonderful actors who were in it and the crew. And I didn't want it to go to waste. I wanted the memory of the film somehow to live on. But more importantly, it was very important for me to make a movie about the movie, because it answers the problems of every director who's ever directed anything in their life, of what happens when you go to work and you make a movie, because nothing ever turns out the same way, and it's like a wonderful evolving kind of a liquid process, you know, to make a film and direct a film, and you figure everything out, every frame and every shot in your mind unconsciously. Not consciously, but unconsciously. And you know what you want to do with it. And so it's a wonderful example for young directors to see and learn, not from me, but just to learn from the experience of what happens when you actually go to work and you make a movie. And I think that's terribly important, and it's really the only way I can contribute to this insane but wonderful process called the film making, you know, which is...
Yes, of course.
And I
found it incredible that you, even so many years later, have such a total recall of everything that happened. And obviously, since then, you've bounced back. You've made classic films like the Changeling and Romeo is Bleeding, and you know The Craze, and you've sort of made really memorable and fantastic films after this disastrous experience, and yet it's still fresh in your mind, and you still sort of have some unresolved thoughts, shall we say, about the whole thing.
No, of course. I mean, it's unresolved because it was never officially released, and then I got the blame from everybody, from Columbia and from John Heyman, who remained really a great friend. And I mean, Peter Sellers, I keep saying throughout the documentary how much I loved him and love him even today, and Spike Milligan, because they were geniuses. They were really comic geniuses. And it's just a tragedy that the film itself doesn't show that same level of genius which it could have had, which Peter had done in so many of his movies, and so did Spike, and because it was an unfulfilled kind of dream. But my recollection about all my other movies is exactly the same, and I'm sure you could ask all the directors that you never forget anything. And the most frightening thing is that so often we get involved in a script or in a project, and then the 11th hour you decide, for whatever reason, not to make that film. You've already made the movie in your mind, and you never get rid of the frames and the images of those films. It stays with you in your mind forever. I guess it's a wonderful thing, but it's your mind is full of all this jumbled up thing, and then of course later on in your life, in your career, you never waste anything, but you use things up, and I mean, it was, honestly, it was completely effortless, And the minute I went back to Cyprus, where I have not been at that time I made the film in 1973, and I went back to Cyprus maybe 5 years ago, and then we went to the locations where some of the scenes had taken place, and I'm back in the same incredible 12-mile beach and climbing up the hills with the pool crew following me up the hill and the mountain, because I was absolutely determined to find the exact spot where I shot some of those tracking shots with Peter, and where he had his heart attack. And I went back to those places, and it's incredible to stand there, 45 or 47 years later, in the same spot where you actually stood so many years ago. And very sadly, most of your people, your actors and the crew, some of them have passed away. And you're not the only one left behind. And it's like time stands still, and everything is the same. It was the same turtle beach, with the little turtles sticking their head out of the water, looking at us, this camera crew, saying, what are these crazy people doing here, which was the same thing when we were there years ago. And it's a very strange but wonderfully nostalgic sensation, that kind of feeling. And I have been sometimes back in some of the locations of my other movies just because I just happen to be there. And we are crazy people, all of us, And
Sure.
it's a wonderful. I wanted to direct movies when I was a very young boy in Hungary. I think when I was like 10 years old during communism, and there was no chance of me doing any of that. I wasn't allowed to go to school because of my kind of background, which was total nonsense, kind of communist persecution nonsense, and because I was middle class and I was working class, and since I was age 13, I never went to school. So I had to, I don't know, but then just life throws you out, and the revolution came, and I left England when I was 18 years old. I left Hungary for England when I was 18 years old, and somehow started my life. And but my dream was already at age 10, to direct films. Can you still hear me?
That's fantastic. Yes, yes. No,
Okay.
I can hear you. I don't want to take up any more of your time, and I think there might be a storm coming here or something. So I was just wondering maybe if you had any parting thoughts.
Well, you are in Belgrade, right? Where are you from at the moment?
Yes, I'm currently in the country, but I live in Belgrade.
Yeah, but I mean, being Hungarian, but I have become English really when I left from Hungary. But I spent quite a bit of time, in Belgrade and all that part of the world, and I mean, my only parting thoughts is that I love the world, and I love making movies, and I love making movies, and I just hope that I still have the chance to make maybe one or two more movies, which would be great. And that's it. That's my whole life, and that's been my whole life. I'm very proud of it, to have managed to spend doing that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this conversation and for your incredibly entertaining film.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and take care.
Okay, good luck. All the best.